it's Graham here, living the dream in what's left of 2021, and I hope you've enjoyed our Antigua 21 Adventure series, which finished in the last video. One thing that I'm constantly being asked is, which is our favourite Sandals resort? And as we've just come back from the Sandals Grande Antigua, I thought it would be quite a good idea to do this video, which I've named the Battle of the Grands, where I'm going to look at both the Sandals Grande Antigua and the Sandals Grande St. Lucia and tell you, in my opinion, which is best. And somehow I think you already know what my answer's gonna be. So here we go, guys, let the Battle of the Grands begin. In this video, I'm going to take a look at a number of aspects of the Sandals experience, both the Sandals Grande Antigua and of course the Sandals Grande St. Lucia. First of all, we're going to take a look at the arrivals process at both St. Lucia and Antigua international airports and what facilities Sandals have to offer. And then we're going to take a look at the free airport transfer between the airport and the resort in both St. Lucia and Antigua. And then we'll take a look at the arrival and check-in process at both resorts. And finally, we'll take a look at both the Sandals Grande Antigua and the Sandals Grande St. Lucia resorts themselves, considering the rooms we've seen and experienced, the dining experiences, and I'll consider what's good and what's not so good at both resorts. To set some context for this video and of course our opinions, Fiona and I first visited the Sandals Grande St. Lucia in 2013. We went back in 2014 and then again in 2015 when we started to take a lot more video. And in 2016 we made a 9-night trip to the Sandals Grande St. Lucia to celebrate a big significant birthday of Fiona's. Our fifth and last trip, notice I didn't say final trip, to the Sandals Grande St. Lucia was in October 2020. In contrast, we've only been to the Sandals Grande Antigua twice. First of all in October 2019 and again in October 2021. And of course this being our most recent video series running up to this Battle of the Grands. Considering the two Sandals Grands, I'm going to give the arrival process to St. Lucia hands down. And the reason is very simple. Sandals have an arrivals lounge at St. Lucia's Huonora International Airport, and it covers all three Sandals resorts on the island of St. Lucia. Those of course being the Regency Le Toc, the Halcyon, and of course the Sandals Grande St. Lucian. The video you're watching now was from our October 2020 visit to St. Lucia. The lounge was very quiet, of course due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we have travelled through this lounge when it has been much busier. And it can get very busy when multiple aircraft arrive from the US and the UK at the same time. But I have to say that during all 5 of our trips to St. Lucia over the years, the Sandals airport arrival process has been nothing but excellent. This is in complete contrast to the arrival process in Antigua, where Sandals do not have an arrivals lounge. Sandals have an arrivals kiosk on the curbside outside the front of the terminal. It was completely chaotic in 2019, and it was even worse when we arrived in October 2021, because Sandals didn't even seem to have a record of our booking. And therefore it's no surprise, guys, that I'm giving the Sandals arrival process squarely with the Sandals Grande St. Lucian. When it comes to the airport resort transfer, in this Battle of the Grands video, I'm only looking at the free shuttle bus transfer between St. Lucia International Airport and of course here in Antigua's VC Bird International Airport to the Grande Antigua. And as you can imagine, guys, I'm giving this one to the Grande Antigua. And it's very simple, guys. The transfer between VC Bird International Airport in St. John's, Antigua and of course the Sandals Grande Antigua takes approximately 15 minutes. Jumping across to the island of St. Lucia, a 40-ish miles journey between Huonora International Airport and the Grande St. Lucia can take between 90 minutes and 2 hours. It's also not a great journey due to the road conditions and the various small villages that you've got to pass through en route. And of course, with St. Lucia being a very lush volcanic island, the road between the airport and the resort makes its way through the mountains and the rainforest. You then have to negotiate the traffic as you drive through the middle of the St. Lucian capital, Castries. And while Castries is not a big city, traffic can sometimes be horrendous, delaying the journey between the airport and the resort. But even after you manage to negotiate your way through Castries, Rodney Bay looms ahead, and sometimes with heavy traffic and poor roads it adds another 30 minutes to your journey. And by the time you finally reach the causeway to Pigeon Island, let me tell you guys, you're ready for that first cocktail, especially after coming off an 8.5 hour flight from London. So there you have it, guys. The Battle of the Grands stands at 1 each. Next up, check-in. Anyone who's watched our Sandals trip reports over the last 8 years will already have guessed the outcome to this segment of the video, that I'm giving the check-in process to the Sandals Grande St. Lucian every time. 5 times 5 arrivals and cold towels every time. Also, every time we've arrived at the Sandals Grande St. Lucian, we've been met by Lance Paul from Club Sandals, and we were always escorted up to the Club Sandals lounge. And during our last visit to the Sandals Grande St. Lucian in October 2020, we were also met and welcomed by a member of the loyalty desk team and presented with the returning guest t-shirts while en route to the Club Sandals lounge. The welcome that we received from the Sandals Grande St. Lucian from year 1, 2013, continued to be nothing but excellent over the 5 trips we made to this incredible resort on Rodney Bay, St. Lucia. Jumping over to our first visit to the Sandals Grande Antigua in 2019, there were no cold towels on arrival, there was no welcome, and quite frankly we were just left to find our own way to the Club Sandals lounge to check in. Thank goodness our great friends Donna and Michael were there to show us where to go. But finally somebody did turn up from Sandals in the end to direct us towards the Club Sandals lounge. And as you can can see, guys, the Club Sandals lounge was rather chaotic, full of passengers just off a BA from Gatwick and an American from Miami. Quite frankly, the team at Club Sandals couldn't cope. There were not enough iPads to check everyone in, and in some cases it took more than an hour and a half to check guests to their room. And this wasn't a great start, and our first impressions of the Sandals Grande Antigua weren't great back in October 2019, but it was to get a lot worse. At this point en route to the rooms, we had stopped because Donna and Michael were rather confused. Being regular travellers to the Sandals Grande Antigua, they were left bewildered because the room they had booked was certainly not where we were walking in the direction of. And it was therefore extremely clear that the Sandals Grande Antigua staff were not telling them the truth, and the fact that their room category had been double booked and they were being moved to a room that they certainly weren't going to be happy with. Leaving Donna and Michael behind, bewildered and not sure what was happening, Fiona and I were then escorted to our room. And unlike poor Donna and Michael, we got the room that we requested at the Sunset Bluff. So in conclusion, our first experience of the Sandals Grande Antigua wasn't great, and we felt really sorry for Donna and Michael because the Sandals Grande Antigua was their favourite resort. Notice I said was their favourite resort. So that's it, guys. That's why I'm giving the check-in process to the Sandals Grande St. Lucian every time, making it 5 out of 5 hits for the Sandals Grande St. Lucian and 2 out of 2 misses for the Sandals Grande Antigua. Finally, let's look at the resorts themselves, including a number of aspects. Starting here in the gardens of the Sandals Grande St. Lucian. And to be absolutely honest, guys, when it comes to how well both resorts are manicured, there is nothing between them because the fantastic grounds maintenance teams at both the Sandals Grande St. Lucia and here at the Sandals Grande Antigua do an awesome, fantastic job, keeping the grounds in such a fantastic state. And I commend them both for a job well done. When it comes to the beach, I know that a lot of you who have been to both resorts are going to completely disagree with my score on this one because I'm going to give it to the Sandals Grande St. Lucia. I know what you're thinking, guys. Graham has gone completely mad here. Surely the fantastic beach at the Sandals Grande Antigua defines this incredible resort. And I do accept that the beach at the Sandals Grande Antigua is a gorgeous beach, one of 365 on the island. But in my opinion, the Rodney Bay outlook just beats the Sandals Grande Antigua sea view every time. And that makes the beach quieter. And with it being a private beach, I believe there are no vendors. And at the Sandals Grande St. Lucian, there are swings, hoops and hammocks in the water. And that means there's simply more to do on the beach in St. Lucia. And of course, when you take a hobby cat out on Rodney Bay in St Lucia, there is simply more to see. And it certainly seems a lot safer to be hobby catting in the relative safety of Rodney Bay, rather than the open Atlantic of Antigua. Not to mention the fact that you can weave in and out of the other boats moored off Rodney Bay Marina. When it comes to restaurants, both resorts are fairly similar. Both Grands, of course, have the Bayside, a breakfast buffet restaurant in the morning and a French a la carte restaurant at night. They both also have a Kimono's Japanese restaurant, but given our recent experience at the Sandals Grande Antigua in 2021, the Kimono's at the Sandals Grande St Lucian, in our opinion, is massively better due to the theatric. Basically, the show put on by the fantastic hibachi chef. The Sandals Grande St Lucian also has an Indian restaurant, which the Grande Antigua doesn't. However, the Sandals Grande Antigua has a Mexican restaurant, which the Sandals Grande St Lucia doesn't. But sadly, on both visits Fiona and I have made to the OK Corral at the Grande Antigua, it's not been great. Both the Grands also have an Italian restaurant, and they're both very good, serving pretty well the same menu. All of the Sandals we visited over the years have an English-style pub. Well, they call it an English-style pub, I'm not quite sure. It's called the Londoner in St Lucia, and here in Antigua it's called the Drunken Duck. For me, the menu here at the Drunken Duck in Antigua makes this the better pub, but I would say that there is a better choice of whiskies at the Londoner in St Lucia. However, when it comes to your restaurant experience, I'm going to give it to the Sandals Grande St Lucian every time. And my reasoning behind this decision is very simple, because the staff at the Sandals Grande St Lucian simply make the resort, simply make your stay more engaging. They're friendlier, they're funnier, and it just makes your dining experience a much better experience overall. Finally, I want to look at the rooms at both the Sandals Grande Antigua and of course the Sandals Grande St Lucia, where we are now. The rooms in our experience in both resorts are pretty well much of a muchness. The decor is very similar and the rooms in both resorts are very well appointed. I did make reference to the first room that we had, which was 5112 at the Sandals Grande Antigua in October 21, was a bit tired and badly in need of a renovation. The water pressure in Antigua is also very poor, but I'm not sure that Sandals can do much about that. This was probably the most basic room at the Sandals Grande Antigua. It was comfortable, it was sort of clean, and the air conditioning worked. Even in this most basic of rooms, you do get a fully stocked minibar, but you do need to upgrade to a club level room if you want top shelf liquor. This was our second room at our visit to the Sandals Grande Antigua in October 21, and it's a Sunset Bluff club level walkout room. Compared to the basic room that we had during the first 6 nights of our stay during this vacation, this club level walkout room was a lot more spacious and modern. However, Donna and Michael weren't so lucky during their visit to the Sandals Grande Antigua at the same time as us in October 2021. Their room clearly hadn't been cleaned properly. In fact, it was quite disgusting. And that's one of the many reasons I would give the rooms category in this video to the Sandals Grande St Lucian. First of all, the rooms at the Sandals Grande St Lucian all have RFID room cards, while at the Sandals Grande Antigua they're still using 1970s era magnetic strip room key cards. And because we kept our room key cards in our phone wallets during our recent visit to the Sandals Grande Antigua, Fiona and I were constantly having to go back to reception to get new key cards made up for us. But when it comes to rooms, what defines the Sandals Grande St Lucia, from Donna and Michael's club level penthouse here in October 2020, with its awesome view over the beach and Rodney Bay, to these incredible over the water bungalows, which of course had their own private decking area area on Rodney Bay, to my personal favourites, the Rendezvous, which of course both the Sandals Grande Antigua and the Sandals Grande St. Lucia have, with their enormous bedroom and of course that very private outdoor space. I just think the Sandals Grande St. Lucian has more choice when it comes to this level of privacy, through to the less private but equally fantastic swim-up rooms. So when it comes to the resort, I think you know where I'm going with this one, guys. For me, the Sandals Grande St. Lucian pips the Sandals Grande Antigua in every way. In my opinion, it's simply better. The rooms all seem to have been renovated over the last couple of years. Rodney Bay and Pigeon Island provide the Sandals Grande St. Lucian with a much more natural location. And quite frankly, there's just more to do at the Sandals Grande St. Lucian. Of course, both Grands are beautiful resorts, but I hope you will appreciate why I do believe that the Sandals Grande St. Lucian, in my opinion, is nicer than the Sandals Grande Antigua. So in conclusion, I guess you're not really that surprised that I would have chosen the Sandals Grande St. Lucian over the Sandals Grande Antigua. One thing that I didn't really get into in this Battle of the Grands is the price difference between the two resorts. There is no doubt that the Sandals Grande St. Lucian is much more expensive than the Grande Antigua. However, I guess the question you've got to ask, is it worth it? And I think probably, in my opinion, it is, given that our experience here in 2021 at the Sandals Grande Antigua really wasn't that great. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed this little video. I certainly enjoyed making it. So to answer the final question, which is our favourite Sandals resort? Well, of course guys, it's the Sandals Resorts Grenada. I bet you didn't expect that answer. Maybe I'll do a video on that in the new year.